This week on Merchants of Change, we've got Cianna Levi. Cianna is currently an enterprise SDR at Outreach. She spent 4 years as a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader and 2 years dancing for the Portland Trail Blazers in the NBA before making the shift into sales. Here she is, Cianna Levi. I'm J.R. Butler, co-founder and CEO of The Shift Group, and you're listening to Merchants of Change. This is a podcast about transferring the skills and behaviors we acquire as athletes and military veterans into becoming a professional salesperson. Each week, we'll introduce you to a top performer who will help us understand how they became professional merchants of change. What's up, kid? How we doing? Today on the show, we've got Cianna Levi. Cece, thank you so much for being on the show.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am too. So just for context, for new listeners, Merchants of Change is it's our show that is really built for new sellers and people who are considering a career shift into sales. And it aligns with our mission here at Shift Group. We help elite athletes and military veterans become elite sales pros. And our podcast guests are typically former athletes or veterans who have found success in sales and business. And, you know, from a structure perspective, CC, we kind of start with the sports background and we go through the transition to sales. And then we kind of finish with some sales nuggets you've been learning since you've been in the space. Is that a good plan?
That sounds great. I love it.
Awesome. So we mentioned this early on. You're our first athlete in this sport, and we like to start really intentionally broad with our first question. And I'd love for you to hit on some of your fondest memories from your dance and your cheerleading experience. Where does your mind drift off to when I ask that?
How much time do we have? No, I'm just kidding. So for context, I was a Portland Trail Blazers cheerleader for 2 seasons. And then I made my way over to Dallas, where I spent 4 years altogether, 3 being on the current squad of the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, and 1 being an all-star cheerleader, which is a squad of retired cheerleaders that kind of fill in when needed. And so, you know, I've done both NBA and NFL, and I love having that background because they are 2 completely different monsters, if you will. But my first initial thing that I always think of when people are like, you know, what's the best memory? What do you automatically think of is locker room, both sides. You know, I've made my best friends in the locker room. They were from literally across the nation. You know, I have friends from California all the way to New York. So just being in the locker room with especially 36 girls, you can only imagine, you know, the gossip's flowing, the hairspray is flying, everything. So the locker room for sure is my favorite memory. And then, you know, really cool events going off of Cowboys. I got to dance with people like Queen and Adam Lambert. I got to be on the track at Formula One in Austin, you know, for opening laps and winner circle, literally just to name a few. So that's off the field. And then you have the seasons of, you know, those nail biter games, you know, just the Cowboy Stadium just being so loud, you can't even hear your own thoughts. I think those are just, again, some of the few fond memories that I have.
I love it. I love it too, because I did an episode and Tom interviewed me and he asked me, what did I miss most about sports, or what's my favorite memory from sports? And I immediately said locker room. And I think we get that probably 80% of the time. Right. So it's really cool.
I bet you didn't have hairspray in your locker room though.
No. You would be surprised though. I have some friends that are pretty set in their hair care ways, believe it or not.
Love it.
I remember my dad was a referee, and I used to, this is like in the 90s and late 80s, I would go to him after, and he would he would pack a hair dryer, and his buddies would make fun of him for using a hair dryer. So you do see a little surprising things sometimes.
Love it.
So before we get too far in the interview, so I don't ask any, and also just so other people don't that are listening to this, what are like some of the more frustrating questions people ask you about being a cheerleader?
Yeah, I think it comes from, really not knowing how much work we put in behind the scenes to really getting into for the boots, just being on the court. It really does come from so much background and so much extra effort just to be on the field or the court. I also think, fans get really excited, and sometimes they ask interesting questions that I don't think you would ask a certain, a VP of sales, for instance. I think people ask, oh, well, you're a cheerleader. Do you get paid for that? I don't think you would ever ask, a VP, well, do you get paid for that? I think you have to realize that we are employees of whatever organization you're a part of. And, you do get paid. I think overall, we get paid in so much more though than, the average person would think. Like, I get paid on being front row to every Cowboys game. I got paid for so many different events that I can't even explain. Meeting so many new people. I've gotten to meet so many pop stars, so many celebrities. Those are the things that I, truly did the job for, and being able to dance next to the top tier people. So that's kind of what I look at. And then, yeah, you get your funny questions here and there, but I think it just comes from, I think a lot of people not knowing that I had a full-time job outside of cheerleading too. So it's like a full-time job on top of a part-time job. But that part-time job being completely full-time too. So, it comes from that.
Totally. Yeah. And I do think, like, I mean, you were a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader. Maybe it's the 90s kid in me, but that's like playing freaking baseball for the Yankees. Like, it is the top of the top in that field, in my opinion. Right. So
thank you.
One of the things I'm like obsessed with, especially as a new CEO, is organizational excellence. I'd love to dig in a little bit on, like, what are some things that we can learn about the way the Cowboy cheerleaders conduct business? Are there like core values, principles, like rituals and traditions that you think are very relevant for like business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I think when you hit a professional's stage, it is a business no matter what. So it's conducted as a business. But you just have to really, like, I think of so many things that translate well to sales from just my Cowboys career in general. Being accountable for, your strengths and your weaknesses. And that's what I had to do on the field. If I was bringing down the team in any way, I had to really go in and make that correction and, make sure that I was performing to the best of my ability, not only for myself, but for my team. And then, just that competitive nature. I think that's one thing that the Cowboys do really well. We're all so competitive to be in those boots, but it's almost never with each other. We're competitive towards ourselves. So, it's not always like, oh, well, why did she get something over me? It's more of, okay, well, why am I here? More so. So let me be the best of myself and really step into the boots and perform at the best of my ability. And then just having that pride, the Cowboys made it so that every time I slipped on the uniform, put on my boots, it was like I was so proud to wear that uniform after, all that hard work and blood, sweat, and tears that goes into it. You're finally in the boots, so you want to wear that with pride. I think that's something that they do so well, and you're never for a second comfortable, which is, I love that. I think it's like the um, tenacity that we have to being the best in the industry, and just kind of really, holding ourselves with the star on, on our uniform. And whenever we go out and we meet, the community, and all the stuff that goes on outside of the field, it's really that pride you have when you wear that uniform.
100%. Yeah, and it's earned through years and years of excellence, right? And it's
Yeah, absolutely.
you're really following in a legacy of like, and I think companies that can capture that, you tend to see like really special outcomes from too. You know what I mean?
Sure, absolutely.
Now, when you talked about the locker room and missing the teammates the most, which I totally relate to. When you look back at some of your favorite teammates from Dallas or Portland, what are some of the characteristics that your favorite teammates share?
Oh gosh. Well, they laugh at my jokes. That's one. And then two, I think we all bonded through the grind. I think, the teammates that were really there for you when you were having a hard night, um, the ones that you could just call at any moment, and, they're there to really console you and empathize with you. Because nobody really else, nobody knew what we were going through except for them. Nobody could relate. You would talk to, my mom. I would talk to my mom, and I'd be like, well, this happened. And she was like, oh, it's okay, honey. And I'm like, no, that's not what I needed to hear. you know, that's when you call your teammates. And, we've cried together. We've laughed together. And I think through the hardest times, and I think that's what made us such a tight knit team. I think people, just going off of the show, think we're always, again, competing towards each other. But I was always happy for somebody on my team that would get something, because it was good for them. Again, we were never competing against each other. We were just all trying to be the best that we could individually be for the team itself.
Totally. Yeah. And that is, that obviously the show is competing to get on the team, but once you're on the team, you're a team. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
How do you think your teammates would describe you from your cheer days?
Well, I think I was always the loudest laugh in the locker room. I think my director used to call me the giggle monster at one point, because I would just laugh at everything. And, I think, again, I tried to be there for the people who needed me most. And really just tried to make people smile. That's my biggest thing. If you're enjoying what you do, I don't think there's anything that can really stop you from, climbing to the top.
So Cece, everybody's seen the cowboy cheerleaders on the field on Sundays, but can you walk us through what a typical week looks like leading up to Sunday for you and your squad?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually really glad you asked this, because I think a lot of people think once you make the team, it's kind of like you just jump onto the field and everything's a go, go, go moment. There's so much more. I think once you make the team, it's like that's when the work begins. So, a typical game week, we have practice every night. You're there for however long it takes you to nail what you need to nail. And then game days, Sundays, that's a whole day in itself, depending on what time the kickoff is. It's, anywhere between 5 to 6 hours before the game. You're busing over to the stadium, you're getting ready, you're having a full game day practice, trying to get that in as soon as possible, because then you have the away team up on the field, trying to get their kicks in and their warm-ups ready. But we need the field, so we got to get that going as soon as possible. Then you have a pre-game performance, and then you have pre-game itself, and then the game starts off. So it's really just you go during that week. But it's also your adrenaline's pumping the whole week, because you're so excited for game day. You're so excited to put that uniform back on. And then game day is just, you look around the stands and you're just like, these Cowboys fans, they're like the best of the best fans. And, it's America's team when you think about it. And everybody, it's fun to think that, there are some fans in that stadium that's their first game and could be their last game. So you think about that and you want to make that game their best game day experience, So that's kind of what gets you really giving 100% from kickoff to, when that last whistle blows.
That is such a cool mindset, because you're right. Who knows like what it took for those people to land in that stadium, right? Some people take that
absolutely.
for granted. That's awesome.
For sure. And that's something our director always really harped on. If you meet a fan, you have to think about, is that the first and the last impression of a cheerleader that fan will ever have. And when you think about that, I think you really try to make every encounter very special and very, tailored to that person. So, I always want to, it's fun, people will come up to me and ask, oh, can I get a picture? Oh, can I, get an autograph? But I want to learn about you. Where did you come from? Where, why are you visiting? Are you here for just the game? Are you having fun in Dallas? Anything like that. Like it's really, I want to make that encounter as special for you as it is to me. So
that's amazing. And I agree. They're America's team. I'm not ashamed to admit, as a kid who grew up in New England in the 90s, that I had a Dallas Cowboys starter jacket before Tom Brady rolled into town. And anyone who tells you differently is full of crap.
I love it.
So you're on the field in Dallas on a Sunday, December, January, end of the season, and you're just dreaming of cold calling strangers and pitching them software, right? Like so obviously I'm joking, yes. But what happened? How did you end up in sales? Did you look in other careers?
Yeah. So I actually, like I said before, I had a full career while I was dancing. I was in PR and communications, and I did that for 4.5 years. And I absolutely loved it. I worked for the American Heart Association, and, I'm working for a mission like theirs. It's really gives meaning behind your work. But I think in the role that I was in, I felt that I had really exhausted the role itself and kind of felt like I wasn't growing in any other way. And, that happens. It was nothing against my team or anything like that. I think it was just the role, maybe the industry that I was in. And I felt like there was, without dance, I wasn't being completely fulfilled. I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't talk about is retirement from, a professional sport. You go through an entire cycle of, questioning, like, I don't want to say it's an identity crisis, because I don't think that's like the correct term of it, but I think you really do go through like, what's fulfilling to me now that, my sport is gone. And I know a lot of people can't relate until you hit that spot, because I was like, sometimes you just move on, but it's not that simple in a lot of cases. So, when I retired, I moved to Seattle, and my boyfriend actually is a retired athlete as well. He was a wide receiver in the NFL for 7 seasons. And, we talked about kind of how you bounce back, and I really, in my way, thought I needed to just really dive into something completely new that I can spend all of my time and energy really just learning industries in and out. So I had a mentor here in Seattle, as well as my sister. My sister is an NFL cheerleader as well, and she is in tech as well. And she was like, they were both telling me, try sales, try something, like something very people oriented, that I can really talk to different people from all over the place. And I think when you think of sales for the first time, you really think of something like aggressive, and I didn't want to cold call. I thought that was, when people get cold calls, they immediately hang up on you. I'm like, oh gosh, like who wants that rejection in their life? Like asking for that rejection. Then I thought about it, and I was like, why am I judging it based on just that? I don't know anything other than that. And so when I was looking at new positions, Outreach, where I work now, in their job description, it had, if you had been involved in competitive sports like dance. I've never seen that before. And that really hit me hard, because I was like, this company respects dance, as a competitive sport, which I don't think a lot of people do, which is fine. But I think because a lot of people don't understand what, the work behind it again. And so when I interviewed and I got the job, I was like, just so excited to try something new. Again, just dive in full on and learn from bottom up. And I couldn't have asked for a better switch, because I love what I do. I look forward to those cold calls now.
that is awesome. How like, what's been the hardest part about going from, Dallas Cowboy cheerleader is the pinnacle of a cheerleading career. So like, what was it like starting over and you were crushing it in PR and marketing. So like, what is that like, start over? What was the hardest part about that?
Yeah. I think it's an ego thing, to be honest with you. I think I really had to bite the bullet and kind of realize that if I'm going to start in a new industry, you have to go from bottom up. And, we've all been there. I think you just don't want to go back there. But like, for instance, to start in my professional dance career, I couldn't have just jumped into the Cowboys. I had to start from somewhere. And I thought of it like that. And again, I was like, I don't want to start with people that are just out of college, just, very entry level position. But then I thought, so many people have restarted their careers. It's really just myself holding me back at that point. And then, when you start connecting with people and realizing people have made career switches from, 20 years old to however old they may be, like there's always going to be somebody that's going to make that switch. So I was like, why not now?
Totally. The analogy we use, because we work with a lot of professional athletes, and we also work with like a lot of special operators from the military, like Navy SEALs and Green Berets, and they push back. Amazing. Like I don't want to do a BDR job. Like I have all this life experience. I should be able to start as account executive. And the example, like we'll tell a Navy SEAL, like, okay, would you bring LeBron James on a combat mission? And they're like, no,
exactly.
He doesn't know the fundamentals. Exactly. And we're like, exactly. Like, and the Dallas Cowboys aren't going to pick up a Navy SEAL to be their quarterback because he was a Navy SEAL. Like you gotta start over. And to your point, it's all about ego. Like you gotta kind of, ego's the enemy. You gotta kind of get over that.
It is.
Know what I mean?
And it is hard, going from, the top of the top to going into a new career at the bottom. But then, you also think, how do I build respect in my new industry? It's from really working and, cold calling. When I talk to VPs, directors, execs, whoever it may be, they respect the grind of a cold call. I know a lot of people think, and don't get me wrong, you do get the rejections, you do get the hangups, but you get that I got that in dance too, and I'm used to that, which I think also helped me a lot. I think athletes have that hard skin of rejection and can handle that, which I think is amazing.
Totally. And a huge part of the transition, and I can tell you kind of have this down a little bit, so I'm curious to get your take on it, but it's really about telling your story, right? And how it is setting you up for sales success. So we have some folks in our program now from the dance background, from a cheering background. Can you talk a little bit like how you framed your experience from dance and cheer in a way that made you like a really great candidate for outreach?
Yeah. Okay. So then I also thought, in the outreach interview process, I really harped on the fact that I wasn't just a cheerleader. Obviously, that the dance background is half the battle, but also I was a brand ambassador, which I think sales is huge for being. You are the ambassador for your product. So can I talk to people? Can I make them listen to me? And am I enjoyable to talk to? Basically, it's a people game at the end of the day.
Yep,
It really is. So,
totally.
when we've had Cowboys have had us through media training, set us out on events where you're with, not only corporate events, so you could be talking to executives from different companies, huge companies, but also celebrities, in front of the media. We've been on a ton of events where you're on the fly. They hand you a mic. They're going to ask you a few questions. Can you answer them eloquently and without the Cowboys having to worry that they put you in front of the media and you don't know what you're talking about? So I think, I'm trained to not only know now my product, but how can I talk to a sales leader so that they would listen to me and care for what I need to say to them.
I love that. The brand ambassador thing. That's a layup. It's so true though. Cause you're the face of the Cowboys. You're the face of outreach now.
Right.
For
right.
whatever segment of accounts that you're calling on.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of people don't realize, but next to the players, we're the most recognized faces of the brand. So, and that goes for any professional athlete. You're a face of the brand, no matter what sport you play. If you're on the roster, you are part of the brand. So I think that translates really well in sales. I'm an SDR and I work for outreach. So I represent outreach, whether I'm on a work event or I'm, just out having fun on a weekend, at the beach or anything like that, just meeting new people.
Totally. So that's a really good nugget for our listeners. Now getting into sales, right? We've had folks on this show that were in sales, like when me and you were in diapers, Cece. So I think it's actually refreshing to get somebody that's newer to the industry a little bit.
Sure.
And outreach is obviously, you guys are a wagon, right? Like you guys are killing it, growing, and pretty well known for your SDRs, your SDR business and your organization. So I'd love to know, like, what are some of the concepts or tactics that they're teaching you in training that you think have been the most helpful for you so far in the day-to-day grind you talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the big things is when I'm cold calling, I really did take rejection in the beginning very to heart. I think you have to get rid of that like immediately. I think
Yes.
when you kind of realize that the person you're calling is you don't know them and you're really just trying to help them in some way. It's not, I'm not trying to beg you to listen to me. I'm really calling because I've done research and this is why and how outreach can help you. So when I get that into my head, it's not like I'm a big person of, I don't want to bother anybody on it. I don't want to bother you during your day. I want to be respectful of your time. But when I think about it, of the reason why I'm calling is so that I can help you in some way. That's a huge like mindset change, of that's how I'm going to approach a cold call.
That's so good. It's so true. Like, I think I take it for granted because I've been in sales for so long. Like, it's like water off the back when I get a rejection. Yeah. But it is, initially, it's hard. You take it personally for sure.
You do. And I think, especially an athlete coming into, when you come into this industry, you want your immediate response is to be perfect. I think any professional athlete, you have that sense of perfection that is built in when you're playing your sport or you're doing your sport. So, I came in thinking that I every time I picked up that call or that phone, I was going to book a meeting every call. And you got to get over that hump of, you're not going to get every fish in the sea, but you're gonna try.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And perfect is the enemy of great too. So you
Yes,
almost got to remind
exactly.
yourself of it, just like sports.
Yeah,
Now,
exactly.
Tom told me that you're part of a team that is like in office at
Yeah.
Outreach. Do you think that's helped you get off to a fast start? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I was a part of the wave too of before COVID happened. I was in office every day. So I was very used to the office grind of a job. Um, when my first couple years on Cowboys, I went to the office from 8 to 4:30, drove to our facility, got ready at 5:30, practice at 7, go till the wee hours of the night, and then you do it all again. So the office never hindered me in any way, but I think in terms of when you are going into a new industry, when you're learning a new role, I think an office environment is huge. Because especially, when I'm making my first cold calls, having my team around me dialing, listening to their conversations. What do I like well, or that they did well on that call? How did they book that person? I think that is what really helped me in learning. Of course, I'm all for the remote days here and there because the flexibility is nice, obviously. But I think in terms of, again, learning new skills in sales, I think an office environment is great to have.
I don't think it can be understated how much learning is done through osmosis versus like
absolutely.
in these structured like trainings and things. You're just going to learn good and bad habits that you don't want to do because
Absolutely.
it's a lot easier to recognize a bad habit in someone else, even if you already have that bad habit, right? Like, so I think I'm really glad you emphasized that part of being in the office because it accelerates your learning significantly.
It does. Absolutely. And even when I have a bad call, I think just having the people around you that are like, you know what, actually, you did great. Here's what I would do differently. That's what I need, because I know there's going to be those bad calls. I do. But I want to know how I can go forward from it. I think it's a lot like, I always tell my boyfriend this because we have a conversational intelligence aspect to our platform where you can listen back to your calls and really learn from, what you did well and what you didn't. And I listened to those like he did film and we did film as well. So it's really like watching film. And that's helped me a ton in growing in the role itself too, because I can listen to also my growth, from the first few calls of me kind of stuttering, trying to get my pitch out, to now where I'm just having a conversation with a prospect. Again, learning what goes into their sales process now and, what their day-to-day looks like. And again, how can I help you? So.
That's so good. It's so good. It's so true too. Now question before we get to our last two. So a Cowboys or a Trailblazers dancer calls you, and they're considering a shift into sales. So kind of a two-part question. What are you asking them to help them figure out if sales is a good fit? And what type of company or opportunity are you pointing them to?
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. I think I love connecting with athletes, especially, trying to get them into new roles, because I've been there. it's a hard, it's one of those vulnerability things that, you just have to knock down your walls and really ask for help in terms of getting you into a new role. So I'm going to throw that out if anybody ever does need that. But I think, are you ready for the grind again? I think a lot of people being at a top tier, you kind of think, I'm going to go from a top tier to a top tier again, where you have to be willing to get that top tier back to the bottom again. So, are you ready for the grind of sales? Are you ready to really, I want to say, drink from a fire hose? It's a lot of information coming at you at once, but being able to adapt to a new role, a new cadence of work, and just really put your full self in it. In terms of what role, there's so many roles in sales, or in tech, and then sales is just a small sector of it. But I do think that starting from the bottom has helped me really realize how to talk to sales leaders, what's important to a sales leader, and how to really make somebody listen to me in what they're caring about, so that they can realize, what do you bring to the table?
Totally. Yeah, I think asking questions is like such an important skill to have as a salesperson.
Totally. Yes. Probably. And I think some people think that, when you're cold calling, you have to ask really complex questions, whereas you really don't. You're trying to understand how that business functions, so that you can not only you yourself understand it, but tell them again, how can you help in certain aspects?
Yeah, I think like this is a little off topic, but you hit the nail on the head, right? A lot of people have this like premonition of sales being like the lying, the pitching products, the high pressure tactics. And I think like the way I usually explain to people why it's not like that anymore, it's mainly because of the access to information is the same. So when I call someone to sell them my product, they have the same access to information that I have. What I have to do is I have to figure out if they've thought about the problem that I solve in a way that would put us in a position to say, well, here's how we think is a good way to solve it. And here's how we've done it. Here's some examples of customers that have done it based off the research I've done at your company and things that I've learned. Here's why I think we'd be a great fit. So it's not like I'm not pressuring them into it. I'm seeking to understand. And then when I do, and I do feel like it's the right solution, that's when, you do want to, my old saying when I ran sales teams was win them over or run them over. Like if you're right and the person you're talking to maybe doesn't agree with you, that usually means you're at the wrong level. And there is a little bit of, you do have to be a little aggressive sometimes, but for the most part, it all starts with empathy, in my opinion.
Right. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, all right. These are our last two questions. We ask every guest these questions. So the first one, we like to ask our guests to highlight one of the skills that you have that's made you elite in sales. What do you think that one skill that you have that has made a huge difference for you?
I really do think it's being able to talk to people. And I know that sounds so simple, but I think it's I don't want to say a lost quality anymore, but I think a lot of people aren't able to hold a simple conversation anymore. And we all have to realize that in sales, it's really people talking to people. I don't want to come off as a robot. I don't want to come off as, just focused on just selling the product. I really want to understand your company, what your company does, and again, how I can help you. So holding that conversation and being comfortable in, sometimes there's silence on the phone. Be comfortable in the silence, and really listen. I think a lot of people I mean, I was guilty of this too. You know, when you're so focused on like booking a meeting, for instance, you don't listen to what the prospect, all the information that the prospect is giving you. So you really have to sit and listen and realize, you know, what's working for them, what isn't, and kind of again attack what makes sense from your product standpoint to their company. So I think again, just really holding a conversation is what I think I thrive on.
I love it. I love it. And that's so, I mean, that's what sales is. It's communication and collaboration, right? And then, I mean, obviously the outcome you're trying to drive is to move. I call it moving people. It's you know, changing their hearts and minds, obviously, but if you can't communicate and you don't know how to collaborate with people, you're never going to convince, motivate, or influence them or persuade them. Like that, it starts with communication. So that's awesome.
Absolutely. And I think that's where you build your respect. You know, if you can accurately communicate with somebody, I think they respect you a lot more. And that comes with the grind,
and trust you.
And they trust you. Yeah. Yes. And that comes with the grind, you know, when you're putting in the work behind a call, you know, when you have your research, when you know what you're really speaking to, I think people really respect you more. And that's, you know, you don't want to have a generalized pitch. I think it's good to have, you know, in your back pocket, but you want to really personalize. It's like how I was talking to you about that first meeting with somebody when I was with the Cowboys. If I'm meeting somebody for the first time, I really want to personalize that interaction I have with them, because that may be the first or last time they're talking to a Cowboys cheerleader. So same thing. You know, I want to really personalize that conversation, because this may be the first or last time you're having a conversation with somebody from outreach.
So true. So true. So we think one of the reasons we focus on athletes and veterans, CC, is because I don't have to explain to you what it means to be dialed in, right? And we think the highest praise you can give a salesperson is saying, hey, this person is dialed in. So I want to know, like, when we talk about sales, what does being dialed in mean to you as a sales professional?
Probably being dialed in, I would say, is, you know, just really knowing your strengths more so. I think that's probably the best thing you can do for yourself, is really knowing your strengths, but recognizing your weaknesses. I think that's what makes you a pro in anything. You know, in terms of just knowing your product, obviously, but knowing how to speak to people, knowing your target, knowing, you know, the problems you can fix, and then recognizing your weaknesses in terms of, you know, am I doing my right research? Am I asking for help? I think sales is a huge place to ask for help. And I think a lot of times ego can get in the way of asking for help. Once you kind of get that out of the way, and be vulnerable to ask for help, that's what makes you a pro. I know, not even just in sales, but for Cowboys, I had to ask so many people for help. You know, just what does the process look like? You know, do I look like the current cheerleaders that are dancing? Do I have that potential? You know, what advice can you give me? Take that advice and really, that's another huge thing too, is not only when you receive feedback, but really applying the feedback to making you better. That's a strength not all people have. A lot of people don't want to listen to feedback because, you know, sometimes it can be very, you know, people just don't want to listen to the criticism, honestly. But when you kind of break down that wall and accept the feedback and turn it into something new, that's when you're a pro.
I love it. Knowing your strengths and recognizing your weaknesses. By the way, like, if you ask a professional athlete that same question of what it means to be dialed in, they should have the same exact answer, in my opinion. right? Because it's
Absolutely.
like, if you know your strengths, you know how to play or compete. And if you recognize your weaknesses, you know what you need to work on and you put in the time to do it. So
absolutely.
So good. So good. Cece, thank you so much for joining us. This is one of my favorite conversations.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad that I could be a cheerleader on the show too, because thank you for recognizing that as a professional sport. I appreciate that. And seriously, if there's anybody out there that has more questions about sales or, athletes going to sales, I'm all, please connect with me on LinkedIn, all the things.
Yep. You just can't get them interviews at Outreach. That's the only rule, okay? Cece, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
This wraps up this episode of Merchants of Change. If you enjoyed this episode, the most meaningful way to say thanks is to submit a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're interested in working with us, please come find us at www.shiftgroup.io.